Brandon got applause and candles. I had dishwater up to my elbows. Have you ever felt erased right inside your own family? I paid off the mortgage on my parents' house. At the celebration, they toasted my brother, then quietly took out a loan on the same house to send him to Bali for his travel brand. I stayed silent for 17 years, but this time I brought every receipt, every forged loan, and laid them on the same coffee table where his birthday cakes used to sit. If you've ever felt like the background character in your own story, watch this. You'll see how quiet power doesn't mean weak, and how one woman stopped disappearing without ever raising her voice. Don't wait until the damage is done. Watch until the end, because this might be the moment you reclaim everything they said you didn't deserve. Before we dive into the story, if you're enjoying these meaningful stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more. Now let's start the story together. I was 14 the first time I realized birthdays in our house weren't meant for everyone. The smell of lasagna drifted through the air like a promise I wasn't part of. The dining room glowed with candles and laughter. Brandon's 12th birthday, and I stood by the kitchen sink up to my elbows in suds, my sleeves damp, my name unspoken. There were 10 people gathered around the table. Neighbors, Aunt Cheryl, Dad with his camcorder glued to his hand like it was part of his body. "Look at the future of the Quinn name," he shouted as Brandon tore open another box and held up a new video game with both hands, grinning wide like a TV ad. I watched from behind the counter, drying a casserole dish that Mom said I'd left soaking too long. No one noticed I was gone from the table. No one asked me to come back. Mom floated in and out of the room, all smiles and lipstick, handing out paper plates and clinking her glass to draw attention, before announcing Brandon's GPA, his soccer stats, and how some kids are just born with it. When the applause started, I turned back to the sink. That day wasn't the first time I'd been invisible, but it was the first time I understood it wasn't an accident. It was a design, and I was part of the furniture, useful but unseen. Earlier that week, I'd gotten an A on my history paper. I had placed it face up on the counter, hoping someone might notice. No one ever did. I wiped my hands, tore off a scrap of paper from a grocery list pad, and wrote just 7 words. Don't forget how this feels. R. The ink ran a little because my fingers were still wet. I looked around the kitchen, bright counters, magnets from vacation spots we never visited anymore, Brandon's honor roll photo crooked in the corner. I chose the soccer ball magnet. It seemed fitting. I folded the note small enough to fit behind it, slid it underneath, and pressed the magnet flat against the fridge door. My heart thumped like I'd done something wrong, like writing it made the feeling more real. Later, as I wiped down the table, I heard Mom in the living room. She was talking to Mrs. Grant from next door. "She's just shy," she said. "Brandon's the bright one." There was a pause. Rachel keeps to herself, always has. I wasn't even in the room, but her words followed me like smoke. That night, I lay awake listening to the house wind down. Brandon's laughter still echoed faintly from the home video playing in Dad's study. I thought of the note and whether it would survive behind the fridge magnet for a year, or 2, or longer. I didn't read that note for 19 years, but I never stopped living inside it. In 2022, I made the final mortgage payment on a house that still didn't have my name on the mailbox. I was sitting at the small kitchen table in my apartment eating cold dumplings from a soggy takeout container. Rain tapped against the windows like it had somewhere more important to be. I refreshed the banking app, watched the numbers shift, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That was it. 17 years of part-time shifts, full-time nursing, back-to-back nights, and early clinical rotations. Every extra dollar went toward the house. Not mine, of course. Officially, it belonged to my parents, Margaret and David Quinn. But every missed vacation, every Christmas shift traded, every coffee skipped, all led here. I texted Noah Geller, the estate attorney who had helped me set up the trust years ago. "It's done. Final payment sent." He replied within minutes. "Congrats. Quiet power is still power." That was Noah. Calm, brief, precise. The kind of person who didn't need a parade to feel his worth. About 20 minutes later, a text from Mom buzzed through. "Thanks for your help with everything. Brunch on Sunday?" "No, we're proud of you. No, we're grateful. Just brunch." I showed up at the family home with a fruit tray under one arm and 2 bags of groceries in the other. The lawn looked the same, trimmed, impersonal. The welcome mat still read "The Quinns," like I was a guest visiting someone else's story. Inside, Mom was already buzzing around the kitchen, wearing her lemon print apron like it was a crown. Dad stood at the bar cart, popping champagne into orange juice. He kissed my cheek and said, "You're just in time, sweetheart," like I hadn't just paid off their roof. "You look tired," Mom said, not unkindly, just observational. "Still working nights?" I nodded, too tired to explain that I'd pulled a double on Friday to free up the weekend. I started setting out plates while she hung a crumpled banner across the fireplace. "Congratulations, Rachel!" The foil letters sagged in the middle. "We did it," Mom said proudly, raising her glass. "The house is finally ours." "Ours," I echoed, more to the floor than to anyone else. Dad launched into a story about Brandon's latest travel vlog, how he was in Peru, connecting with the culture, as if filming latte art in a hostel cafe was noble work. "He's getting thousands of views," Dad said, beaming. "He's putting the Quinn name on the map." I wanted to say that I'd kept that name standing through mortgage statements, tax filings, medical emergencies, but I just passed around the mimosas and straightened the crooked banner again. As they clinked glasses and toasted to family teamwork, I stood there holding an empty glass, remembering every bill I'd paid, every night I'd missed sleep to cover one more line item. They still thought it was their house, their triumph. I should have known. In our family, the one who pays always disappears when the cameras come out. The banner said my name, but Dad held the champagne. I'd chosen the blue dress for calm. It wasn't flashy, just soft and steady, like I hoped the afternoon would be. The sun streamed in through the lace curtains, casting light patterns on the hardwood. Ceramic trays of shrimp skewers and cucumber sandwiches lined the table. Every detail had my fingerprints, even if no one seemed to notice. I stood by the mantel, fingering the note cards I'd written the night before. Just a few words. Something about perseverance, about quiet strength. Nothing dramatic, just my truth. I even added a quote from Florence Nightingale. It felt fitting. Brandon burst in halfway through the mingling, late as always, Haley trailing behind him with a hesitant smile and a gift bag that looked like it had been grabbed at the last minute. Dad clapped him on the back. Mom beamed. I got a nod. I cleared my throat, stepping toward the coffee table. But before I could speak, Dad raised his glass and tapped it gently. "Everyone," he called. "A quick toast." I froze. He smiled the same way he did when Brandon won his first soccer medal. I was the one who drove him there. I remember sitting in the car for hours, waiting, cheering from the sidelines, handing him his water bottle when the camera crew forgot he even had a sister. "To Rachel," Dad began, and I thought, just for a second, that maybe, just maybe, things were different. "She's helped keep this family going. Really. Helped set everything up just right." There were murmurs of agreement, a few claps. I gripped my note cards tighter. "And with everything finally in place," he continued, "we've taken a little leap of faith. We remortgaged the house, just a small loan, to support Brandon's new venture. He's heading to Bali next week. His travel brand's taken off. Sponsors are lining up." I heard the words but couldn't quite place them. Mom added quickly, "He just needed a boost. Rachel's doing so well, she understands." It felt like my ribs had turned to glass. The guests smiled, clinked glasses, lifted their forks. Haley gave me a look, one that held more apology than surprise. Brandon was already scrolling through his phone, probably checking his follower count. I walked slowly down the hallway past framed school portraits and high school ribbons that weren't mine. My hand didn't shake as I pulled out my phone. Noah answered on the second ring. "Rachel?" "Tell me," I said quietly. "The trust still holds." A pause. Then, "It does. It's ironclad." Thank you. I hung up and stood there for a while, watching the light shift across the floor. It wasn't rage I felt. It was something colder, something like confirmation. I didn't need to raise my voice. I had something better, proof. My apartment that night smelled like old paper and the faint, earthy scent of rain-soaked concrete from the street below. I'd turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the warm lamp near the window. Its glow fell across my bed, now covered in folders, envelopes, and a legal pad that hadn't left my sight in 3 weeks. They used to tease me for saving every receipt. Dad said I hoarded like a squirrel. Brandon once held one up at dinner and read it like a dramatic monologue. Gas station burrito, $3.99. What secrets does it hold? They didn't know I wasn't saving. I was documenting. At the edge of my bed sat receipt number 4827, dated 7 years back, detailing a $4,000 transfer made on my birthday. Categorized home improvement. No contractor ever came, just a leak that mysteriously fixed itself. I had 20 others like it. The next morning, I met Noah Geller at his downtown office. Wood-paneled walls, cold coffee on the table, and an efficiency that made everything feel heavier. He flipped through the folders in silence. Finally, he closed the last one and looked up. "The trust is untouched," he said. "What they've done, remortgaging the property, is not just unethical. It may not even be legal, considering your structure holds ownership." I let that settle. Noah tapped the student loan file I'd added at the last minute. "This one," he said. "Taken out in your name at 19? "Denied a federal loan because of it," I said. "Didn't even know until I applied for nursing school." He leaned back in his chair, jaw tightening. "Rachel, this wasn't just mismanagement. This may be criminal misrepresentation." I nodded. "We'll let the paper speak." Back home, I stared at the corkboard above my desk. A web of paper clips connected dates, emails, receipts, and a single post-it that read, "Don't forget how this feels." My phone buzzed. Jenna Kessler, my cousin from Mom's side. We hadn't spoken in months. Her text read, "I saw Brandon's Insta. You okay?" I typed back, "They took the house." I took it back. A pause. Then, "That sounds familiar. Want to talk?" We met for coffee that weekend. Jenna had always been kind in a quiet way. In high school, she was the one who shared her gloves when I forgot mine at Thanksgiving. "They did the same to Aunt Linda," she said, stirring honey into her tea. "Linda?" "My mom's sister, our aunt. She used to run Grandpa's supply business. Back in the 80s, refused to sign it over when Grandpa passed. Family froze her out, never invited her back." I blinked. I'd only heard Linda mentioned once in a whisper. Jenna shrugged. "She moved to Ashland, got a P.O. box, cut contact." That night, I found Linda's name in a state database, property listings, a business license still active, a community grant filed 2 years ago. I clicked send message. 5 hours later, I got a reply. "I was wondering when one of you would call." I didn't knock. I used my old key. It still fit. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly artificial, like nervous hospitality. Dusk slid through the blinds in long golden stripes, painting shadows across the cardboard boxes that lined the hallway. Some were open, half-packed with old books and mismatched kitchenware, like they couldn't decide whether they were leaving or staying. Brandon was sprawled across the armrest of the couch, phone in hand, one leg bouncing. He didn't look up. Margaret stood near the dining table, smoothing a crease in the plastic tablecloth that hadn't been used in years. David paced near the fireplace, arms crossed like a man preparing for cross-examination. I walked in quietly and placed the folder on the coffee table. The same table where birthday cakes used to sit. His cakes, not mine. Inside the folder, the deed transfer records, trust documentation, notarized letters from Noah, and 3 copies of a voluntary agreement. The last item? A letter I'd written at 19 when I was denied a student loan. It had coffee stains on one corner. David was the first to break the silence. "What is this?" I stayed standing. "This is proof. Ownership, fraud, forgiveness, if you want it. You tricked us. His voice was sharp. "We trusted you." "You depended on me," I said evenly. "That's not the same thing." Margaret stepped forward, her voice trembling. "We thought we were doing what was best. For the family. For Brandon." Brandon scoffed from the couch. "Well, that worked out great." He reached into his backpack and pulled out his own folder, crumpled with dog-eared corners. "Here's what Dad did to me." He dropped it on the coffee table. Inside, credit card applications, federal student loan approvals, even a rental agreement, all in his name, all signed in handwriting that looked an awful lot like David Quinn's. David's face flushed deep red. "You ungrateful—" But the door opened before the sentence finished. Linda stepped inside without a word, her coat still on, eyes calm but sharp. She didn't need an introduction. The silence did that for her. "It's been a long time," she said softly to Margaret. Margaret looked as if she might sit down or faint. She did neither. I pushed the papers forward. "No lawsuits, no charges, just sign and walk away." Margaret hesitated, then reached for the pen. Her signature was shaky, but complete. Brandon followed, barely glancing at the terms. Haley moved to the kitchen, quietly pouring herself water. David stood still, frozen. His gaze flicked from me to Linda and back again. "You think you've won," he growled. I zipped the folder shut. My voice didn't rise. "No, I just stopped losing." I didn't want revenge. I wanted air, space, a sentence of my own. The house was quieter than I remembered. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. More like the moment after a long sigh. The hardwood creaked under my steps as I walked room to room, pausing in each doorway like I was saying goodbye to someone I used to be. The living room still smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish. The couch was gone, the photos too. Only the sunlight remained, stretching across the bare floor, catching in the dust. In the kitchen, I reached behind the refrigerator. The old soccer ball magnet was still there, chipped around the edges. Behind it, folded and yellowed, was the note. 14-year-old handwriting. "Don't forget how this feels." I didn't need it anymore, but I took it anyway. That evening, we sat at Linda's kitchen table. Me, her, and Jenna. The chairs didn't match, but the rhythm did. Soft jazz drifted from a small speaker, and the scent of roasted vegetables filled the air. There was no grand speech, just a table, a meal, and the kind of company that didn't need permission. I slid the note across the table. Linda read it without touching. "They only see us when we drop it," she said, her voice low, thoughtful. Jenna reached for the salad bowl. "Or when we walk away." My phone buzzed. It was the realtor. I stepped outside, signed the last of the papers on the porch railing. The for sale sign had already been hammered into the lawn. White wood, red letters, clean edges. It wasn't just a sale. It was a release. Linda joined me outside, a light cardigan around her shoulders. She handed me a blank postcard. "Write something," she said, "even if it's just for you." I held it in my palm for a moment, blank, full of room. Then I stepped off the porch, not looking back. Not this time. Sometimes the greatest freedom isn't found in winning an argument, but in choosing to walk away with peace. That night, under the porch light, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. Family can teach us how to love, but it can also teach us how to let go. When silence becomes our role for too long, speaking up, even gently, can be an act of self-respect. And sometimes the most powerful legacy is not the house we inherit, but the boundary we finally build. If this story touched something in you, feel free to share your thoughts or memories. Your voice matters, just like every quiet one in every family.